welcome everybody to another episode of the Quarantine Leadership Series, where we hope to motivate, inspire, and engage around leadership. I'm here today with a longtime friend and a great Y advocate and a longtime Y advocate, Kris Dunn, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer for Kinetics. Kris is a must-read blogger, a must-listen to on a podcast. I mean, he's on my regular hit list that I keep reading and listening to, and really a sought-after speaker around leadership. So I'm thankful, Kris, for you giving us a few minutes today. Thanks.
Yeah, Cam. Thanks for having me. I got to point out, I don't know how this will get edited from a visual perspective, but just over my shoulder here, there's a basketball player on the top, and I got to tell you, he just won a state title in 7A basketball in our state, and Shooting Jim, the Greystone YMCA in Birmingham. Great people there.
That's great. There's a couple of our avid listeners I know are the Birmingham Y. So this is a crazy world, of course, and even in the Y, I think people are going to work more remotely and further apart. What advice do you have about how do we build work family and work community when we're going to be together less?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we're right there with you at Kinetics because we're going to we've made the commitment, especially for our recruiters, and we're a recruiting company. You know, that's a job that can be done digitally, unlike, you know, kind of the place of the YMCA, although you have like a mixture of programs. It's a hard thing. I think what we see both for ourselves and for our clients, the people that are working remotely are trying to be super purposeful, Cam, related to how they get together and how often, you know, we've all become a little bit like Zoom fatigued. So you really have to be creative related to why you're getting together, what you're going to do. And you probably have to have like some things you do on calls like this, like breakout rooms and things like that, to get people together where they can just talk. I think what you have to do is you have to create a digital environment if you have a remote workforce where you're purposefully getting together to build culture. I think another thing we see people do, we do it ourselves, is rewards and recognition. If you've got like a standard meeting and you and I are like here on video and we've got like 10 other people on our team, you always want to like put rewards and recognition embedded as an item in the call, right? You've got to do some type of stage banner that helps you build culture, like whatever is important to you. And the Y has a real specific mission. You don't want to be so business-like that you don't take a little bit of time on every call to do what you could ordinarily do in a meeting, which is, you know, kind of shoot the stuff and like, you know, be conversational and do things like that. But it's hard. I think you've just really got to be purposeful. And then the last thing I'll give you on that, Cam, I'll throw it back to you, is I like really believe that if you're getting together a lot on Zoom and you're doing a lot of this stuff, which I think is great, I think it's the right thing. You know, I view the super informal, like water cooler or walking by your office, I now view that as a normal, I guess it's not analog, but a normal digital phone call, voice to voice, without the pressure of video, is now it's kind of a weird thing. It's kind of a pivot. We're on Zoom so much, a lot of our organizations are in this remote world, that me calling you just to check in after the meeting to say hi, like no expectation that I have to be on video, et cetera, I think is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. I think our younger people even want it as a text message. I mean, even less than the phone call. I mean,
that's
just
right.
Text me. Or, you know.
Yeah, variety of platforms, right? And you as a manager could check in with those young folks on text, and it's going to be in their normal like live stream, and it's going to feel like normal to them. You got to meet them where they are for sure.
So in the Y movement, we are seeing, and probably outside the Y, a lot of retirements. A lot of people are just moving to retirement. I don't think there's in our movement a great bench strength. So to move up into these CEO positions, and maybe even some people are less willing to move and travel around the country to different locations. But give advice to leaders that are listening on how they can develop their bench strength. What would you be doing to develop young leaders or just develop a bench?
Well, so for me, Cam, the most important thing, and we have at Kinetics, we've got this leadership training series called the Boss Leadership Series. And that's not a sales pitch as much as it is an intro to tell you kind of like what I think the most important thing is. I think the first thing, Cam, that I would tell any of your peers that are trying to build teams and kind of build that bench strength is you really, especially with the younger generation and people that are coming up in their careers, which I think is a lot of bench strength that exists within WISE. It's a lot of young people, and certainly you have more like tenured folks as well. But I think the first thing as a leader is folks like you and I, Cam, have to have this spirit of really being an agent for that person's career. And the way I say this is kind of goes like this. It's like, hey, like if you were on my team, Cam, I would say, I want to have the sense through a lot of conversations that, hey, Cam, I'm glad you're here and I'm going to grow you and make you better as a manager of people. And, you're going to get a lot of domain experience while you do that. But my job as your manager is to invest in you without fear of you leaving. If I make you better, if I'm so invested in you that I make you better, and we get 3 years down the road and something great comes along and I don't have a career path for you, or the Y organization as a whole doesn't have a career path for you, then we're going to shake hands. You're going to help me find your replacement. And we're going to work on that. What happens when you approach it with that spirit, Cam, is people get uniquely linked to you as their manager. And there's a trust and a bond where there's no fear. And guess what? You end up with better retention with a high performing person than you would have by like being worried that you were going to lose them. You just have to embrace it. And if you embrace it, then you're in better shape. And then it kind of goes along. If you really want to create bench strength, what's the most important thing? Kind of back to like how we view leadership training is, what are the 12 most important conversations that those people have to have with their people? Because the people who can deliver on those conversations, whether it's coaching, hey, I just saw something, let me like, there's a way to handle that. Performance, change, like the people who can deliver on those conversations and do it in a way that sounds uniquely like them, that's super authentic, those are the folks that win. So back to the leader, if the leader can train the people to do that and give them exposure to all those tools, there's just this sense, that you can do great things together.
What a powerful culture to incorporate,
Right.
I care and I want to develop you. I care and I want to develop you, and that goes all the way down.
That's right. And Cam, I believe, I know you a little bit, you've had that in your career, right? You have that sense about you, even if it wasn't a unique purpose, but that's Cam. And I'm Kris. There's all these like leaders and managers out there that, especially coming off COVID, when the workforce is getting tighter and tighter, people are slow to return to work for a variety of reasons. They're worried about losing people and they want to leverage people to keep them. But it just, it's kind of how's the old adage? If you love something, set it free. You don't want to set them free, but you just want to say, hey, I got you and we're going to make you better and we'll see what happens. And you do that naturally, but not everybody does.
Well, so I'm transitioning a little bit. We read a lot about pay and compensation, but when you read Gallup or other things, people talk about people leave jobs because of their boss.
They do.
Is it their boss or pay? Which is it?
Well, I think, pay for me, and I think you'll agree with this. I think pay is transactional. It's got to rise to a certain level for an individual in their circumstances. And I think, so it's got to rise to that level. That'll let them join an organization for where they're at in their career. But I agree, make no mistake about it. If you have a great manager, then you're going to be less likely to leave, especially if you think you have a development path, whether it's, I use the YMCA since it goes out to Ys, whether it's in your Y branch, your metro Y system, regional, national, whatever, you'll join for the pay, but you'll stay because of the manager and because you think you're getting what you need. Real quick, we do this whole adage as a recruiting firm. This is what I believe. If you can get somebody to jump for a 0 to 5% increase, they're gainfully employed, they're running from something. And it's generally, to your point, the manager, the culture, generally those two things are intertwined. If you get to 20 to 30%, it's hard to have somebody stick, but everything below that, if you do things the right way, you'll get more retention than maybe the thought leaders, maybe like myself, would tell you would. It all comes down to the quality of that interaction.
So we're working really hard in our organization about developing leaders that are focused on developing their talent. And so I did an exercise with my group. One of my branches actually, I'm working on something, and we talked about the obstacles to being a high performance. And then I made them break them down on what's a human issue and what's a technical issue.
Right.
And 90% of our obstacles were human.
Right.
And when you really broke those down, they were around communication. I mean, and so where are we falling short? How do we be better communicators as a leader? And where do you see your companies falling short, and how do we get better at that?
Yeah, I think the best way to get better at communication, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios, right? But I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer. There's like 10 conversations that managers have to be good at to be better than their peers. I'll give you 2 examples. The first one is just really day-to-day coaching. So if you think about like with young managers and people who are really good at what they do, but maybe managing people is like the second, third, or fourth thing that they're good at, those individuals, the instinct, especially if they're not high assertive, is to wait to coach. So if you see something around the why, around your organization, either on the floor, like in communication going through on email, like what you heard about a conversation they had with somebody else, it's human instinct not to want that confrontation. So the first thing you've got to do is have a good coaching tool to allow you for me to go to Cam and say, Cam, hey, I saw this. We teach that you need to just go to Cam, make the observation. Then we teach this little framework about how not to lose control of the conversation, remind them of the goals, and then kind of ask them what they could do different moving forward. Now that sounds clinical, like, for a call like this, Cam, but when you really get in the guts of it, people just need an approach on how to have those conversations. And the second one of many I would give you, Cam, is performance. And back to my thing where if I want to make Cam, my direct report, believe that I'm entirely invested in them, from a performance perspective, you don't want to wait to a performance review or like a one-on-one that maybe you get to like on a monthly basis. You always want to be having conversations. We call it good to great, to borrow from Jim Collins. As a manager of people, I want to observe Cam's performance and I want to reward it by telling him that it was good. But then I always want to be following up, hey, to get to the next level, like you could do this, but you can't give the advice on how to get better unless you reward them with what was good. It's kind of the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And if you frame that in the right way, it really sounds like, oh, okay, Cam is getting me ready for what's next by telling me what else I could do.
Yeah, I had a restaurant owner tell me, he owned a bunch of restaurants. He told me he called it constant gentle pressure. Yeah. He wanted his salt shakers on the table a certain way. And when he saw them, they weren't there, he would immediately correct. And he goes, it's just constant gentle pressure to do it the correct way.
Yeah. And by the way, Cam, we teach it the other way too. So if you see something good, like from a coaching perspective, you just say it. That's easy, right? You reinforce it, right? There's this pitter patter of reinforcements, and then no delay, like to the extent you have the opportunity not to delay, you get into the coaching tool right away. And we teach a certain framework. I think there's a lot of frameworks out there, but a lot of our folks don't know how to get into that conversation. They think they've got to take 20 minutes to talk about it. They really don't. And you don't have to take 20 minutes for something more complex than a salt shaker as well.
Yeah. So for the young staff that are listening, kind of the under 25 or the recent college graduates, one piece of advice for them on their future.
Well, if they are, let me like help you frame this up for me, Cam. Do they want like a career that includes managing people?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We all do, right? Because like I've been in the Greystone Y in Birmingham and I see these unbelievable like young people, like young professionals at the front desk on the floor. And it's a great team. And they all, like I talk to them and they all have these good backgrounds, but they were hired for a specific reason. They're great representatives of the Y. So I'm thinking about them, right, Cam? Like when I walk in, that's kind of my, visualization of this exercise. What I would say is be curious about the craft of managing people. Like all of you, if you were hired by a great Y leader like Cam and his team or the folks in the Birmingham Y, I think, you were hired for a reason. You've already got this natural DNA where you're going to be good with people. The vast majority of people, and I see in a Y will, but you have to be curious about the craft. And you have to you have to look at the great leaders inside your organization. What do they do well? Because that's the growth area, right? Let's back to the conversations, Cam. When they grow and they become a manager of people, they're not going to know how to get into the conversations. They don't need formal training in it, but they do need to start observing how their mentors and their peers within the organization and in the outside world have these conversations. How do they get into it? What's their demeanor? Because all the really quality leaders do it naturally, but most of them didn't get there naturally. They learned from somewhere else. So Cam, I think be curious and look at the great leaders in your organization, try and emulate them, and then do it in your own style.
And we just learn from our mistakes, as before I hit record, we shared, the mistakes we had made around leadership. How have you changed during the pandemic? How's your leadership, or has it changed during the pandemic?
Well, I think everybody's had to change a little bit. I think I was already, I live in Birmingham. Kinetics is based out of Atlanta. And if I wasn't otherwise on the road, I'd be over in Atlanta a couple days a week, Birmingham the other 2 to 3 days a week. So I was already remote a little bit with a remote team. I think just, being more purposeful about like expectations and what has to get done. I think even though we have Zoom, we have the magic of Zoom, which is great. We don't get together as much as we used to. And all of those, I call them drive-by conversations that you used to have to set the tempo for the organization. I think you've got to be more purposeful. Things can fall through the cracks too. I think the other thing that I've been humbled by is the fact that, I think I'm giving great feedback. Well, I think I'm giving great, kind of specs on a project and what I need done via email. And email, man, it'll get you. That's what I've learned. And, like most Gen Xers, Cam, I think I'm great at email, but it turns out I'm not. So I have to do a better job combining all these tools to help people have what they need. So I think I've been humbled by the fact that you can think it's great in your mind, but you're still responsible for making it clear in the other person's mind. And it's not their fault if they don't get there. Now, if you go through 2 or 3 other conversations and they're still not getting it, then maybe they've got a lot more responsibility. But I've just been humbled by that communication chain, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Best leadership advice you've ever received?
I think, I'll go back to what I said a couple of questions ago. Be curious, right? Dig in. And there's so much to be curious in the world about, but, knowing the business, understanding the art of managing people, knowing what's going on in the world that could have impact on your career and your business, it all just stems naturally from being curious, right? And trying to find people like you in my life, and hopefully vice versa, that you can grow from. News sources. By the way, what a complete burned landscape of news we live in today. And you have to be very selective. And I'll tell you this, Cam, in terms of me being curious, the best thing I ever did. So I use Google News just to scan headlines. Best thing I ever did is I turned off what I consider to be the top 2 most polarized news sources on each side of the house. I turned it off. because I was having a hard time finding headlines that would really give me balance. And that's something else I've learned in the pandemic, right? Because this has been, there's so much change going on in the world, and you really have to think critically. So I think be curious, think critically, be your own person. Don't get sucked into this vortex that's going on. Be independent, because that's what the why and every organization needs from a young leader.
Have you watched the show Ted Lasso?
I have not. It's good, right?
There is a big scene, an episode around being curious. You need to watch. I'll just email you that scene. It's classic, but it's a great show. And I think if you really listen to it, it's a leadership show, and it's about what we're talking about. I really think it. And so it's got a little momentum too.
Okay. So I'm going to watch it, and I won't share my password sharing strategy. You may have to edit that out, but I'll give you another Ted Lasso quote. I haven't watched it, but I've got another Ted Lasso quote, and this is paraphrased, of course, but I think at some point he said, it helps to have a memory like a goldfish, because apparently goldfish can only remember 10 to 20 seconds in the past, and then it's done. I think that's good leadership advice too. You want to learn, but I don't think you want to like frame up what's coming in the future by like a quick perception you had on somebody or something. So I'm gonna check out Ted Lasso for sure.
The second time I watched it, I had my pad in front of me and I would take notes, because there's a quote, there's something in each show that you get through it. So I really appreciate your time. And if you're watching today and you want to know 10 or 12 good conversations to have with your staff, email me and I will share those with you. But Kris, thanks again for your time, your wife, friend, and anything I can do for you, let me know. And I hope for everybody out there, if you've watched, subscribe to the channel, and also make sure you lead with love.
Hey,
have a great day.
Hey, Cam.
Yeah.
Hey, quick thing, just all my Y friends out there, state title, enabled by the Y. Just have to share it. Like I know I said it at the front, but that's less about him or us. That's more about the why, because just great organization. Thank you for everything that all of your folks do.
We'll make sure Birmingham watches this. Thanks.
Cool.